these attacks are not just increasing in volume, they're increasing in speed. We're seeing more organizations attacked all at the same time. You can look at how Kaseya was impacted, how SolarWinds was impacted. It's really important to increase that speed of sharing through automation, orchestration, and just good collaboration in order to protect ourselves.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative, in conjunction with Cyber Reason, is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC. I am your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Grant Sewell, Director of Security at AHEAD and former CISO at Safelite Autoglass and Scotts Miracle-Gro.
Hey, Todd, thanks. Security, I fell into it. I think like a lot of us in the field did, right? When I went to school, there really wasn't a degree for security. It was something that was still being formed. And for me, I worked in all these different areas of IT and didn't really find one area that I wanted to do that solely. And, security is great in that aspect that I get to touch those areas of networking and server and even help desk still. And I love that. I love being able to, really look at things from a really wide breadth. And now in my current role, being able to really execute a strategy that makes such a difference. And so, that was a long time ago when I first got started, and I just ended up in security, and I've been doing security for 15 plus years now.
Wow. You just seem like you just started security. I think because you have such an energy about this field. Well, and in my youthful appearance, also helps from that aspect too. But yeah, I'm passionate about it, especially as I've moved from more highly regulated organizations to organizations that are more business driven and customer focused. I really love the challenge of security because it's easy to have a regulation and to tell somebody, no, you can't do this, or we'll block this, or you can't use this application or something like that. But the challenge of saying yes and figuring out how do you make something work to truly enable a business and drive it forward, that is the thing that's really kept me so energized about security, especially in the last 5 or so years. And I think that's really refreshing because, security's always had that bad rap of the Dr. No experience there. And you clearly have been engaged in helping people get to yes. And I'd like to talk about the piece that you wrote for CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. And you wrote about experience with an information sharing and analysis center. Can you walk us through that? And what is this for those of people that may not be familiar with it? What is this Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or ISAC, as it's typically called? Yeah, no, that's a really great question. The ISACs, and there's several across multiple different industry verticals, but they were formed after 9/11 as part of the Department of Homeland Security's initiatives to foster better collaboration within the industry. And it's the same thing we always, say, especially at conferences and larger groups, is security is a shared problem. There's no reason that, two different retailers can't collaborate on security, because that's not a business, it's not a competition driver. It's truly everybody's problem, and we need to solve it. And so I served on the board of directors for the Retail and Hospitality ISAC for about 5 years, and really enjoyed growing that organization. And I would tell you today, they're probably
one of the highest active ISACs, in probably compared to maybe FS ISAC, the financial services ISAC. So the purpose is to create a quick vector for organizations to reach out for help, be able to share intelligence around threats, and then collaborate together on the best ways to stop things like fraud, ransomware, malware attacks. When the financial services ISAC really started growing, the biggest threat at that time was when banks were being attacked through the distributed denial of service attacks. And I'll tell you, that was one of the biggest benefits we had, was to be able to talk to other banks and protect ourselves so that we could continue to operate, because there was really no good way to fight against it unless you had the intelligence in advance. And so really the concept comes back to, we're stronger together, and that collaboration across an industry to fight common threats. That's the purposes of the ISACs and why they've been pulled together.
We had another CISO Stories podcast with Steve Katz, the first CISO, and he was talking about the FS ISACs and sort of the beginning of that, and that where he was bringing together executives in New York to in the banking industry to talk about some common issues, not necessarily the threat vectors that we have today, but talking about things even like the desire for certain antivirus products, and it found it to be a very powerful resource in communicating with the vendors. Have you found that to be the case in the ISACs you've worked with as well?
Absolutely. And I wasn't there when the retail and hospitality ISAC started, but it's a very similar story, right? It was several CISOs across different companies that came together and said, hey, this is a big problem, and how do we work together to really found this and start? And those are some awesome leaders and CISOs that really helped drive this forward. You have to always be considerate of the fact that it is an industry organization. It's there to help foster that collaboration, and especially even vendor partners have been fantastic in that. We really try to straddle that line of, you never want to say we only recommend this product, or we're going to give this one, because that gets at an antitrust thing. But overall, the vendor partners are really key cornerstone of that, because they really listen to the industry well, especially for, say, smaller organizations that are members. By being part of that collaborative, they get to have a voice in how products and solutions are delivered, and really it gives them an opportunity to amplify their message of what problems are facing them, or understand, hey, how is the larger organization doing it? They don't always have that connection. What we constantly heard in feedback from the ISAC meetings and conferences that we had was that the networking and the connection availability, just to be able to reach out and know, oh, that's Grant, he's the CISO over here, and be able to reach out and ask a question in a friendly way, that made all the difference. That was the money, paid for itself in a membership fee right there, just by being able to reach out and contact somebody that maybe you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't know that you were both, solving the same problem.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of information is shared in the Cybersecurity Collaborative, which is an organization which sponsors this podcast. And that's also an organization that brings people together to interact with each other and discuss ideas and everything. But one of the things that I see separates the ISACs from the work that's done within the collaborative is the sharing of threat intelligence that the ISACs bring to the table. Can you talk a little bit about what sort of benefit or sharing is occurring within the ISACs?
Yeah, I think, one of the great, kind of core concepts of the ISACs is really the trust that everyone, comes together with there. And that's, before, when you would first start sharing intel, everybody was a little tight-lipped. Especially when we first started, and we didn't want to necessarily share these IPs or these indicators that we found or how you were attacked, because you don't want that to get out. You don't want to show off your weaknesses. But within the community, really been able to partner with both intelligence sharing platform partners, but also that kind of aspect. Really when it started, we were sending out emails to say, hey, I saw these 5 IP addresses and they did these things to us. You may want to block them or find them or do whatever. Or here's some phishing, email issues. It was very manual. And now with those vendor partners coming in and the ISACs themselves, even developing product sets that are now commercialized to automate sharing, that's really, kind of out of that need, out of the ISACs is where you saw standardization of intelligence feed sharing, like the STIX and taxi protocols, to be able to actually move forward in those areas and make it more efficient, because the intelligence that we receive on a regular basis out of any of these organizations is so voluminous that it can't possibly be done manually anymore. And that ability to really evolve all of these different vendor product suites to automatically be able to ingest these feeds of intelligence, remove stuff when it's no longer relevant, and really contribute back and forth in an effective way. That was something that really grew out of the ISACs. And now it's very commercialized, right? You can buy commercialized threat intelligence feeds, but there's also these private aspects that you get from more targeted industry related organizations like an ISAC.
How much do you see in these feeds as being relevant and current?
It varies, right? It's garbage in, garbage out, as they say, right? So sometimes you don't always get the most relevant intelligence, and sometimes it's not there. I would say if you are, and I'll use the retail ISAC as an example, if you are a retailer receiving intelligence from other retailers out of an ISAC, well, yeah, that intelligence is much more timely. It's much more relevant versus, say, subscribing to a commercial intelligence feed provider, which is more generic. I'd also liken it to many of us, we're in InfraGard now and probably have been for a very long time. But that intelligence that we got out of the government was often extremely dated. It had to be declassified and released appropriately and censored. And by the time you go through that entire process, it's often dated so far back that it doesn't matter anymore. It's very retroactive. Versus the intelligence you're getting out of these ISACs is real-time things coming out of someone else's tool, going straight into a sharing platform, and then being able for you to consume it right away, if not automatically, within minutes, as opposed to sometimes, days or weeks, as we saw in the past.
So there's obviously a risk for organizations, particularly those that are new to sharing information, that the legal department is probably likely to put up some sort of barrier to sharing this information. How do you work around that?
I think it does come back to some of that. There are legal agreements, right? And it does come back to that aspect of trust. Most of the ISACs operate with a standard traffic light protocol. So, they're pretty clear about how to share information. It's followed very well. And there's an expectation. There's a code, right? We shouldn't be, sharing information or credit or attributing information to certain individuals. But, the ISACs have also gotten really good about explaining that. You're absolutely right. When these were first starting, the late 2000s, early 2010s, for a lot of these ISACs, it was a difficult conversation to have with legal departments, especially ones in highly regulated industries. But I think we've started to understand, again, we're stronger together. We need to be able to do this in order to be effective. And the other nice thing is, it's not just this offshoot kind of grassroots movement anymore. Being part of a intelligence sharing organization, specifically an ISAC, is part of the NIST framework now. It's an expectation. It's kind of table stakes at this point. And so being part of that, it helps a little bit. We've got the credibility now, and I think that legal organizations are really understanding it, and it can be explained better to them. So I think that barrier is going down. Certainly there in some places, but it's definitely an easier barrier to cross now.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, available at Amazon.com and other booksellers. You track the value proposition as far as because we collaborated on these threat indicators that we avoided a huge breach, or an organization that had a breach that the other retail organizations didn't experience the same breach?
Yeah, I think it's always hard to measure the value prop of something that didn't happen to you, right? But it makes me remember at one of the retail and hospitality ISAC conferences a couple years ago. We gave presentations not just about the key thing, like, oh, I don't want to be breached, and being a member of this org is going to stop that or help prevent it. But we've seen things where people are giving presentations on metrics and threat intelligence and how they're actually measuring business success or performance or benefits to the business of not necessarily preventing things, but hey, by having this intelligence come in, I was able to stop these threats, and these actually did work, right? Otherwise, if I wasn't a member of the organization, maybe I didn't see it. The other things I think that are really good is I've seen multiple times of cases of organizations in these memberships where they've unfortunately suffered a major, highly public breach. And I give a lot of credit to an organization in particular that just days after their breach happened, they were getting on a call to share with the audience, with the membership, hey, here's what happened to us. These are the things you should look out for. Here's where we may have made missteps. And that was not normally you'd have a lawyer there just looking over your shoulder, making sure you don't, admit to anything wrong. But they were just very candid. It wasn't about pointing blame. It was about helping everyone. And I think, by them sharing that and being willing to step up and talk about what happened to them that early, it probably did save some organizations. It probably did help them understand, hey, this is what we could do to protect ourselves before we get hit too hard. And as we've seen, these attacks are not just increasing in volume, they're increasing in speed. We're seeing more organizations attacked all at the same time. You can look at how Kaseya was impacted, how SolarWinds was impacted. It's really important to increase that speed of sharing through automation, orchestration, and just good collaboration in order to protect ourselves.
It's really one of the reasons why I picked looking at security incidents internally and externally as part of the 7S framework that we used in the CISO Compass book around looking at the tools that the CISO has. The CISO has tools of risk assessments and security control frameworks, but there's also a third one, which is really looking at the security incidents, because there's so much that we can learn from other organizations without having to experience that breach ourselves.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's that old saying that says, well, a hacker doesn't care if you passed your risk assessment or your audit, right? In the end of the day, they're looking for those holes. And we see that, right? We're learning from each other. You're learning from yourselves. We're often just so overwhelmed with the volume of things happening in an organization that, we tend to forget those RCA moments. We don't go and look at what root cause was. We don't have time to go fix that specific thing because I'm already worried about the next biggest thing. And that's truly the challenge of a CISO all the time, is prioritization and strategy and getting buy-in. But I think you're absolutely right that, looking at that data, not just in your org, but trying to find the relevant things that are applicable to you. And that's what I loved about these organizations, because they truly give you that measurement of your kind of industry or business. That's the other thing we struggle with as CISOs, right? Is benchmarking ourselves effectively. And Gartner's got great data. There's no doubt about that. But in the end of the day, is that relevant to me? If this organization is spending millions of dollars on security, should I be spending millions of dollars? Should I be spending billions of dollars? Well, it makes it a lot easier when you can look at an organization that's very similar to you, has a very similar customer base, similar business model, similar structure. It does make a big difference about you understanding how you build your program as a whole, and an effective program for that matter.
And what sort of technical things would you share with other organizations in the ISAC?
I think it was kind of all across the board. There's always a lot of especially when it first started, it was a lot of email chatter, right? Just standard news lists of, hey, I saw these bad email addresses, or this is what here's some phishing email reports that you should be looking out for. Here's the newest scam we got. 300 people, saw this phishing. And then you'd see people reply, oh, we got hit by 20 mailboxes. We blocked 5 of them. 50 of our mailboxes got hit. Seeing everybody being, relevantly sharing just this happened to me. But you also saw people sharing standard TTPs, techniques, tactics, and procedures. And what you would see out of that is great. I can ingest that type of intelligence into my intrusion detection system, into my endpoint security tools, into my internet proxy, and just basic things like bad domains, approaches to attacks or types of protocols being used. I mean, name anything, just the methods. That became really helpful because, again, you're proactively stopping things that are known bad from an organization that's already done the vetting of it. And most of these ISACs, all of them have an intelligence kind of team that's vetting these indicators of compromise and helping share that out on a regular basis, walking people through it, because you have organizations that are very highly technical and mature. But as much as you have people that are really mature, you have folks that have joined this organization that are very, very immature or don't have as many resources. Well, if you now, by joining, have resources out of the ISAC that are paid, they're full-time employees that are able to say, oh, here's how you can implement this, or here's a vendor partner that works with us in order to implement them better or faster, or here's a person you should talk to. It's really about helping people along to build that maturity around the entire industry, not just for specific organizations, because you're not alone. You don't have to do it on your own.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I always tell people that say, well, I don't have time to get out to the conference or things like that. It's, well, you're probably going to get more value out of going to those things and working with other people that have been in those situations than sitting in your office for that afternoon.
For the cause, every company is always, pretty frugal around travel. And then it'll be interesting as we kind of come out of this, global crisis that we're in, to see if that shifts back or how much, now that we've all gotten so good at being on these Zoom meetings. But I would agree. I think, there was so much good connections and frankly, a lot of great friendships that I made going to those conferences and just, sharing a beer with somebody and understanding those shared problems. And I still have folks that reach out to me and vice versa, that I reach out to for advice when I need it. But, these folks are some of the best of the best. The people that are there to collaborate are ones that they're cut from the same cloth. They understand it's a shared problem. They want to help fix it, and they're passionate about it. And so you find that these resources are great. Plus, I'll tell you, the ISAC conferences, for the most part, FS ISAC is pretty darn big nowadays. But I love the intimacy, for lack of a better term, of the retail ISAC events, because you'd have 200 or 300 people there, plus some vendors, and it was just a lot easier to make these connections and understand, or just, walk up to somebody and say, hey, it's good to meet you. I'd love to talk to you about how you're solving problem X, because I think we're a lot alike, or I had this issue with this thing. And still a lot of great varied opinions. And you're not shy about being able to sit there and have a frank conversation, but not have to be in that echo chamber of your own company, or sometimes yourself, just trying to figure out a problem. It's great to have that ability to just bounce off ideas. And it's not just the technical things. It's how to run a program. It's how to build your identity function. It's how to, just run good metrics, like I mentioned earlier. Those are things that, frankly, like metrics, it's funny how hard of a problem that is to solve for most organizations. But if you can give really good examples in a very specific industry vertical, wow, that's easy to copy and paste. And now we've solved a problem. And, if we're all measuring ourselves the same way, it makes it a lot easier to compare and contrast too.
Well, and I can attest to, I think the retail ISAC is great. The other ones are great. Having spoken at your ISAC and then sitting down and listening to all the other presentations, it was pretty amazing to me, all the different work that was being done in collecting all this threat intelligence and sharing it with other people. So I think it's a great initiative. So as we close here, I really want to thank you for taking the time to provide your insights. Is there any last piece of advice that you'd like to give listeners around this topic?
Yeah, no, and thanks again, Todd. I've really enjoyed the time to be able to share more of this, and it's definitely a topic that I'm very passionate about because I've seen the value. And then that's, I guess, what I would encourage any of the listeners, that if you haven't explored the ISACs that are available in your industry vertical, even at the bare minimum, the multi-state ISAC is free to get data from. It's not quite, it's more of just a broader sharing organization, but that's a great way to start. But definitely reach out and understand these ISAC memberships are not that expensive when it comes to your overall security budget or even your overall company, revenue. They're usually based off of those sizes. And it is something that even if you're a small organization or a very, very large one, you can implement this. You can get value out of these organizations just by having that ability to collaborate, the ability to get great vendor relationships that are relevant to your industry, and that ability to get some intelligence that is actionable. And so I would encourage, if you haven't looked at it, you need to reach out and figure it out and make contact, because they are looking for more members. They want to continue to grow. And there is definitely value in sharing more and building that trust circle that you need to help you and your company.
Well, I think that's great advice, and I think that's a good place to leave it. Thanks a lot, Grant, for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks again, Todd. It's been fantastic.
Cybereason is the champion for today's defenders, providing an endpoint security platform to prevent, detect, and respond to malicious operations on computers, mobile devices, servers, and the cloud. Cybereason. End cyber attacks from endpoints to the enterprise to everywhere. Learn more at cybereason.com/CISO stories.